Hello everybody and welcome to Amphlett Reviews, back with another Japanese deep dive into Kinji Fukasaku's filmography. This time we're at Ceremony of Disbanding. It does have a secondary title, but I think this one is a lot more appropriate and definitely adds to the theme of the film more. And even watching this version of the film, it does actually have that title, Ceremony of Disbanding. This is available on YouTube for free. So if you do want to check this one out, guys, it's one of the harder access films. As mentioned always in my previous video, guys, I'm kind of exploring Kinji Fukasaku as a director, identifying signature styles, and to kind of see what I can identify all leading up to the Battle Without Honor collection. Once I get up to that point, I'm going to take a little break, and then I'm going to reevaluate and experience that series of movies. There's quite a few of those films from a fresh perspective, with the backdrop of nearly 10 years of work from Kinji Fukasaku, so very exciting. Ceremony of Disbanding, released in 1967, starring Koji Tsuruta, which is our main protagonist character, our main character in this film. It was also in a previous film I have watched before doing this series, Sympathy for the Underdog, which is the main character in that as well. And he's also in Japanese organized crime boss, and then doing a lot of this kind of chivalry type based movies, this kind of gangster based movies, working with a range of amazing directors and collaborations, and getting his kind of signature style, mainly within these later kind of, Yakuza based kind of movies, especially within the more modern setting ones like this one, and within Sympathy for the Underdog and Japanese crime organized boss. Very interesting movies every time I see them, mainly for the fact they are very similar, but I'll dive into more of that in another time. However, for this film, I thought, just going straight into this one, guys, I thought this one was really goddamn good. I'm kind of surprised the reception for this one is quite mixed. I'm kind of surprised, considering some of the kind of quality ups and downs, and some of the kind of shortcomings, and some of the ones before and after this film. I'm very curious to see what people would think about it if it got a brand new release from Radiance Potential or Arrow. I definitely think this one deserves to get a good HD release. I generally thought this was a really good knockout kind of film, and I thought the performances, and I thought the storyline, and I thought it all came together quite well. Again, Kinji Fukasaku was doing his tick box kind of, Yakuza based storylines. At this point, you know what to expect from him, especially when you get up to 1971 and some of his beginning of this kind of signature new wave of kind of modern kind of, Yakuza based kind of crime movies. We know what he's building up to, essentially. And I think this was one of the very much a bullet point, or a first stepping stone, a milestone to leading up to some of the bigger players that we would later see, obviously within the Battle Without Honor collection. The storyline for Cemetery of Disbandment basically follows our main character, which got out of prison. I think he spent about 8 years in prison, if I'm remembering correctly, and basically his organization, his clan, essentially has been disbanded, of course, as mentioned within the opening of the film. It's been set 2 years later, and he's come back into this new kind of post-World War II world, and all of his kind of brothers in arms, all these values, all of these kind of principles, all these ideas that make a Yakuza essentially, of all. And he comes back to this town to reconnect with his brothers, reevaluate his life, his identity, his placement in this world. He wants to reconnect with a girlfriend, a kind of love interest that he had before he went to prison. And it's a very stoic, very kind of calm, neat, very collected kind of person this time around. Whether who he was beforehand, whether he was a ruthless, nasty person, which is demonstrated in the film, of course, later on. He was someone who was one of the top dogs on that kind of organization, and now he's very much stoic. He's very much, neat, calm, collected. There's a lot going on within the kind of facial expressions, and I think his performance in this film, I think, is really excellent, and I think it's really good. And I think the supporting cast and the kind of more erratic kind of characters around him help boost that performance. They all complement each other, especially with these types of films, especially within this one and Sympathy for the Underdog and so many others, very similar kind of rinse and repeat type storylines. They have the same basic kind of template. A person gets out of prison and they kind of reevaluating the Yakuza life. And one of the things I do appreciate about these types of films, especially with Kinji Fukasaku, is that he's never glorifying them. He's never saying, oh, isn't it so cool to be Yakuza? It is fun in terms of an entertaining kind of piece for an hour and a half. It is really badass, and it's cool to have the shades, or it's cool to have a persona or a look kind of thing, or have a weapon kind of thing. But it always ends in bloodshed. It always ends in a sacrifice, or a devalue to your principles, or who you are, or compromise. It's never ends in a glory. It never ends in a good way for these characters, and especially for Kinji Fukasaku films, where they always end in misery and bloodshed and horror. And this film dives straight into that. And one of the things I do appreciate about Sabate for Disbandment is that I actually really like the storyline. I actually really like the idea of a character which is, you know, been taken, come out of prison, and now he's exploring this new world, and all of his brothers are basically disbanded out of course. And I like the structure of the levels. You know, you have one, the youth that come into it quite early on, basically they're described as thugs or thieves. They are background characters in this film. They are kind of at the start and they kind of appear randomly here and there, and they're the ones that are low-ranking members that didn't get much to do in that organization, that clan, and they become basically petty thugs and youth, and they're kind of messing around or kind of terrorizing people. You've kind of got the middle class kind of area, which is some of the low operation businesses or doing side hustles of prostitution and gambling, and, you know, very small kind of, you know, fry kind of, you know, operations, little tiny ones that, you know, they weren't bosses at the time, but they were aspiring to be one. And then you got the higher ups, the executives, the VIPs, whatever you want to say, the top dogs of the organizations, the clan, and they're the ones that are in real estate and you know, landfill, and they're the ones who basically are wanting to make a lot of money on basically ripping out low poverty kind of locations. They want to claim land, and they're using their resources, their kind of skills, as they say, to basically kind of push out the little person to make big profits for themselves. And they're getting into bed with congressmen, and they're making backroom deals, and they're basically using all those tactics, all those kind of things they were doing beforehand, and applying it to their own selfish individual kind of needs. And you've got some kind of clash going on within the film itself. So you've got two rival kind of, let's say, VIP kind of ex-yakuza that are both doing their own kind of schemes, their own kind of plans, and then you've got both of them wanting to dominate basically this land location, this poverty, which has been explored quite a few times within Kinji Fukasaku films, especially within Wolves, Pig and Men. This idea of kind of like the little person is always getting pushed around and beaten up and, you know, taking advantage of, and that's explored within many different levels, within the youth, within the middle class, you know, ex-yakuza members and the VIPs. You know, again, you've got characters that are in the slums, they're in the kind of, you know, they don't have much going for them, just making an honest life, an honest living, and they're getting manipulated and getting exploited, especially within the youth and within the women, which are getting into drugs and prostitution. And now you've got people getting bullied out of their own kind of land, or, you know, the contract's been renegotiated, and it's getting these very typical kind of bully tactics. And within the middle of that, you kind of slum kind of location is our main protagonist's kind of wife and son, which is in that project kind of location. I really like the scenes between them two, especially when he comes back and basically says, you know, I didn't know you were pregnant. I didn't know you had a child. That's my child. And, you know, it's this kind of facing of reality. And, you know, the town community is basically saying, you know, stay away. You know, we told that the kid, basically, you're dead. You know, you just need a father. We don't need you around. We don't need your violence, your trouble, your who you were back then. We don't want that now. His scenes are always quite interesting to kind of see bounced off other characters, you know, whether it's kind of his brother in arms, whether it's a love interest, whether it's a nemesis that comes into it during halfway, which basically wants a showdown, which kind of flashbacks to a moment where he basically chopped off this person's arm, and he's like, you know, I want satisfaction. And I like the comeback of basically saying, I haven't been this happy since I got out of jail.
勝負か。懐かしいセリフだ。ヤクザはみんな転業しちまったと思ったが、まだあんたみたいな人が残っていたとはね。小回りの利かねえ不器用もんでね。あんたに会いにくだったか。いや、無償出てきてからこんな嬉しいみたいな気持ちは初めてさ。
Some of the smack talk I think is great, and I think there's some good personality there, and I kind of like that. The action and the kind of fighting is limited, so don't go into this expecting a kind of bloodbath, action-based kind of movie. There is some violence in the film, maybe towards the last 10 minutes, but I think the actual story itself, and I think the build-up to that, I think is actually quite well done, personally anyway, and this is more of a crime, Yakuza drama with some action alongside it. And I think there is some good escalation, there is some good tense moments without having any sense of kind of knives and gunplay. It's just your investment level on this community, these characters, and within our main protagonist, which is just going for a very transformation of this idea of, you know, I was Yakuza for so long, you know, it's in my nature and I can't walk away from that. And when he sees injustice and what he's seeing with his brothers, and, you know, in terms of, you know, he mentions times about saving their lives or doing something for them. And it's like, you know, what happened to you? You know, what happened to our values? What happened to our principles? You know, what happened to brothers, you know, for life, essentially? And everyone is just self-individualized kind of greed and kind of, you know, corrupt, essentially, and this character just can't believe it. You know, again, it's an interesting talking point, not just within this film, but also many other kind of Yakuza movies. Once Yakuza, always Yakuza, essentially, and, you know, how much of your time, value, and your dreams are you going to sacrifice for the cause? And cinematography-wise, technical aspects are always fantastic from Kinji Fukasaku. I like the fact, again, he's using more outside locations. The interior and exterior is all really excellently put together and filmed, and it looks really good. He's definitely experimenting and crafting some very early ideas that would be defined and perfect within later Yakuza movies, and I can see this as the good first stepping stone into that kind of direction. I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions, guys. Please comment down below. In the meantime, guys, Amphlett Reviews, signing out.